So let's take a look at how flex direction is actually working and what's really going on with this. So when we have a display flex, we've seen that it creates columns. The reason it's creating columns is because the flex direction on it is row, and that's the default behavior. So if you don't declare row, it will be row, and there's nothing you really have to do there. So that's where it makes columns, and it's doing that because it's treating the parent or the flex container like a row of content. So that means inside of it, all the flex items or all the direct children are going to turn into individual columns. Now, what we can do is we can change our flex direction. So we can say flex direction is column. And what that's doing is it's switching the main axis. What do I mean by that? If we have something that has a display flex on it, it looks something like this. We have our flex container, it's a row. So we have our columns of children inside of it. But if I change my flex direction to column, now the parent is becoming the column, and these are becoming rows inside of it. And this sort of makes it look like the original default behavior. So you might be going, well, what's the real point of this? It's really important to understand you're switching the main axis. So you're keeping all of the Flexbox properties, all the amazing things that you can do. Now we've rotated our main axis from being horizontal to being vertical. Why does that matter? Well, let's say we have something that looks like this. We've done our display flex on it, so we've made our columns. We know we can use a justify content space between, and that's going to space all of them out. It takes all the empty space that we had that was left over here, and it redistributes it in between each one of my columns, and that's just super handy. Well, if I take my display flex, but I go and I add a flex direction of column on it with my justify content space between, now it's going to redistribute the space that was down here between each one of them, because justify content is always working on the main axis. And we've switched the main axis. It was going left to right, but now it's working vertically. It's working up and down. So if I want to redistribute the space, I can use my justify content vertically now. So that's really cool. So always remember, when I change my flex direction, justify content will now work vertically and align items will now work horizontally, because we switched the main axis. Justify content always works on the main axis. Align items always works on the cross axis. So a few reasons you might want to do something like that, or examples of how things change. So we have my flex container over here. On the line items flex start, they'll usually line up at the top like that instead of stretching to their whole height. If I switch the flex direction, they're going to do something like this, where they're all getting sucked to the flex start, which is on the left side now. My flex end would be on the opposite side over there. We know that we can center items vertically, which is super amazing with Flexbox. Well, now we can center them like this. And of course, you can combine that with your justify content. So it's not the align items is centering it horizontally, and then my justify content space between is spacing them out vertically, as long as the container is big enough to have empty space on the vertical axis there. Always remember, when you use flex direction, you're switching the main axis. Align items now works horizontally, and justify content now works vertically.